So for those I haven't met yet, I'm Nicole Boulez. I'm an associate principal, practice technology leader at HED. And I spend a lot of my time at the intersection of architecture and technology. How many practice technology or design technology people do we have in the room today? Okay. Oh, that's encouraging. So everybody else is architects, engineers, journalists, the people telling us if it's working or not. So what that mostly means is I'm trying to translate, we've always done it to this way, to what if we didn't? And that's exactly why I'm so excited to introduce Jason and Roan. So starting with Roan, if you know Roan, you know he's into all things fitness, the kind that pushes the outer limits of human ability. And he carries that exact same energy into his work. He doesn't just experiment with technology, he trains with it. He iterates, refines, and builds endurance. He has a gift for shepherding teams through change. He doesn't just drop a new tool on your desk and walk away. He definitely coaches and demonstrates. He shows you what's possible and then pushes you just enough to realize you can actually do it. Jason, are you nervous? What is she gonna say? Jason is my boss, by the way, so I better do this right. So Jason is someone who genuinely likes building new worlds, not just projects, but actual worlds, systems, frameworks, futures. He's often thinking 10 steps ahead of where the rest of us are, which is quite impressive and occasionally disorienting. Many of the things we're just now experiencing at our firm, Jason was quietly mapping those out years ago. He was recently promoted to principal, and I'd like to believe that that promotion signals something important, that our firm understands his role isn't peripheral to our future, it's critical to it. He's also, frankly, a damn good boss. The kind who clears blockers before you even fully articulate them. And I didn't fully appreciate just how rare that is until I had the chance to work closely with Leo, who's in our audience. I know he's sick of me bringing this up, but he really was the blueprint, and that was how I was able to identify Jason. We're getting raises soon, right? No. So this is what great leadership actually feels like: supportive, strategic, calm in the chaos. So together, Roan and Jason represent something I think is essential right now: vision plus execution. Big picture architectural intelligence and the discipline to make it real inside of a practice. Please join me in welcoming two people who are helping shape what architectural intelligence actually looks like in practice: Jason Rostar and Roan Isaku.
All right, well, now I have to follow that up with a presentation. So, thanks everybody for coming. We're gonna kind of mix it up a little bit. You know, Nicole just introduced Roan and myself. Really quickly, because I think this is kind of important for everybody to understand. You know, HED is a national firm. We have a national footprint. We do a lot of work in a lot of different areas. And as a result, we have resources that a lot of smaller firms might not have, right? And we've been very intentional about that growth so that we can make these changes, we can invest in these areas so that we can transform the firm. And it's really important to understand this is an investment. You know, we've got our board of directors recently that has agreed to a 3-year budget that will include staff in areas that we've never had before, building infrastructure that we've never had before, all to kind of build out the infrastructure needed to transition to a firm of the next generation. So our vision for what we're trying to accomplish, and this is the only slide I will read, I promise, is we will lead in integrated design inspired by a culture of people, advanced technologies, and strong business performance, shaping a brighter future for HED, the environment, and our communities. So, you know, in a lot of ways, that might just be one of those typical value statements that's, you know, doesn't really mean a whole lot. But for us, it means the combination of culture, people, and technology to build the next generation of firm. And that's going to happen through delegation and partnership. So what does that mean? It means that we are going to be engaging our business leaders in this transformation. This isn't technology for technology's sake, but rather it's technology to transform the business. If there's not a transformational aspect to what we're doing, we're not going to do it. We're not going to just grab shiny objects. We're not just going to play with tools for the sake of playing. We're going to evaluate, determine what's going to work, and evolve as we go. This partnership, this slide got sanitized, I guess. This partnership involves all the different departments of our firm, but from a leadership perspective, this means pulling all of the people from the business in to get involved. So we have the corporate leadership team, which includes HR, it includes accounting, it includes operations, project management. You have the IT leaders, we have practice technology leaders, we have new infrastructure, data management staff that we've never had before. We have practice practice technical team, really the nitty gritty of how projects are delivered. And then we have our sector leadership, right? The people who are pursuing projects that are part of our business development, engaging with the clients, engaging with the projects. So all of this is coming together to form our data leadership team. And it's really important because, again, we're trying to think about this in terms of business transformation, not just in terms of technology utilization. And the way that we're going to be doing a lot of this is through driving through use cases. So we're looking for use cases in the firm that are driven off of what we call paination, painful points in the process of delivering a project. We're specifically looking for painful points that are not related to design, engineering, and delivery. We're looking for all those parts of an architecture and engineering business that we don't go to architecture school to study, right? Accounting, accounts receivable, following up with the clients. There's a whole slew of what the things that happen during the course of the management of a business that are outside of architecture and engineering. So we're trying to focus on what can we do to streamline those painful points so that all of us that did go to architecture school, did get our engineering degrees, have the ability to focus on what we love and what we are interested in. That process it's called the double diamond process. This is not a new term. This is coming from the technology industry and that world. But the idea is that you're not just going to say, I need a solution. You need to identify the problem. You need to dig into the problem and find what the root cause of it is. And then you go through multiple iterations of solutioneering, big picture solution, and then you dig into the specific solution, and then you come through on the delivery side. So this isn't, one of the things that everybody on my team I always talk about is, I need you to bring a problem to me, not a solution. Oftentimes our project teams will come to us and say, hey, I need this thing, I need you to make this thing for me. It's like, well, what is this thing trying to solve? What is the problem that you're trying to address? Not, I'm not just gonna blindly create whatever you want me to create. So. We're actually starting this process in our use cases by going to our board of directors and the business leaders. So looking for those business specific things, the way that we approach our project, the way we approach a client, the way that we deliver a project, the way that we do our billing, the way that we follow up with clients to make sure they pay their bills. So those are the types of use cases that we're looking for and that we're focusing on first. And that's really intentional. A lot of times when you're introducing new technology, you introduce it from the bottom up. You're going to the people who might be using it, the people who are already technology friendly. And in this case, we're specifically going to the naysayers first so that we can build the use case with them. So that when we get to the harder pieces, they'll be supportive of what we're trying to do, right? Instead of, oh yeah, we know that there's this new thing, but we're gonna do it the way that we've always done it instead, right? So we want to make sure that the market sector leaders, the project managers, the operation leaders, they're all on board because they've seen the value that we're going to be driving through this process. Part of the use case readiness example is looking for low-hanging fruit. What are things that we can implement right away with very little effort? And so it's really important that we go through that evaluation to kind of build up momentum so that we have the clout, the experience, and some of the infrastructure in place to be able to tackle the much harder challenges. Yes. So when we talk about data, like this journey of new technology and data, a big part of it is having usable data, right? And I think all of our firms have, hundreds of gigs of PDFs and random documents stored in random locations that aren't organized and aren't consistent in formatting. And a key part to being able to tackle low-hanging fruit is having usable stuff that you can jump on right away. So as Nicole had mentioned, a lot of what we started building years ago is now feeding into this this transition. And because if we don't have a good starting point for our data, then we have to jump through a lot more hoops to make it usable and make it so that we can come out the other side with the transformation. And one of the things that we've done, and I think I presented about this a couple of years ago. Actually, that's it, in a couple more slides. But so what we're doing is we're building this commercial framework of investments of the infrastructure, building infrastructure, using these low-hanging fruit elements to build the tools, the databases, the hire the people that we need so that we can then follow through and demonstrate adoption, get the right people on board, and then we can pick up momentum and pick up steam. One of the things that we've been focusing on, which Roan will be talking about a little bit more, is building out the infrastructure of data, right? We have data everywhere. We have all of the data that's in our Revit files. We have all the data that's in our employee profiles in like ADP. We have all of our data that's in our billing systems and our accounting systems and our project planning systems. And so what we're doing is we're starting to organize that data into a single location called our data lake. There we go. And so we're building a multi-layer data lake, our data stack. So all of our raw data is going into one layer, and then we're extracting certain parts of our data, cleaning it through our governance process so that it can be more usable if we need to. Like things like if you open up any Revit file, you might have closet, CL, period, CL, CLO, C, C period. All those represent the same thing, right? And so you can either spend a lot of time training your employees, always use this abbreviation, or you can spend a lot of time training your agents and the AI platforms to clean that for you and make it more usable, right? So with all of this type of data, you have to decide, is this a people problem, or is this something we can solve with solution, or with technology, right? And that's what our data stack is meant to be. The lowest level of raw data is our bronze layer. Some of that data will get cleaned and brought into our silver layer, and then the most important data that we're going to be making business decisions on will get cleaned and standardized even more into that top tier. The way that we started doing this years ago, and I'm sure everybody in this room can say that you have your standards. Your standards are your standards, and everybody has unique standards because there are no standards. But for HED, we have our standards, and it's really important from our perspective because this means that every project across our firm of 500 people and 9 offices all starts every single project the exact same way with the same process and the same data. And this is our Project Create platform that we built a few years ago. And in this process, this is what I have presented at a previous event about. Basically, we have a standardized form in our Project CRM platform that every project team member has access to. And when there's a new project, you go into the project space, you request a new Revit file, you tell us which disciplines are involved, you tell us how many levels, how many sectors, if the existing conditions or not. And within a couple hours of that request going through, you will receive Revit files in ACC, standardized naming, standardized sheets, standardized views, regardless of market sector across the entire firm. I'm just going to push the button. So, this is just a super basic example, right, of every single view that gets on an average project, you might end up creating 2,000 views, 1,200 sheets, everything is following our standards, everything's organized the same way. It doesn't matter if you live in Boston, it doesn't matter if you live in Los Angeles or Dallas. Every project in our firm for the last 7 years has been built the exact same way everywhere. And to that point, we are tracking that data, right? So, can't read that, but so over the course of the last, from 2022, the last 4 years, we've had 1,500 new projects go through this process, generated almost 4,000 Revit files in that time, and every single Revit file is built and standardized and put on ACC the exact same way. And that's what we talk about, the importance of consistent data, right? So now you don't have some projects doing things in one way or some projects organized a different way, but rather every project is starting in the Revit world from a consistent starting point. Obviously, once the project teams get their hands on it, that's a different story. But we're at least giving them a good starting point to start the projects. And then kind of the next part about that is talking about what Roan's here to talk about in terms of how we engage with the project teams to make sure it stays consistent.
Okay. So all of our projects start consistently, and we all sort of speak the same BIM language. And I'll come back to that. All right. So I'll be talking about the Revit part of what Jason had to say. So we have all this data in the models, and we have thought of combining that data with all of the data in our CRM. To form the whole project story, if you will, and then we tested it with Revit model health checks, basically. Right? So, and begin training our people or getting our people to think about why this is important. Right? So, instead of just speaking the same BIM language, we also wanted to foster a data culture, if you will, where the input, actually matters. It does something. A parameter entry in your Revit file isn't just a data dead end, right? It goes on and becomes something else, right? So accuracy, performance, consistency, downstream trust, efficiency, very important things. And which was in support of our strategic plan that we have put together for the firm, which I had the privilege to collaborate on. But if you look at goal 2 and focus 2, it says there, leverage data to improve quality management process, reduce permitting time, reduce seeking effort, and errors and emissions liability, as well as prepare for the deliverables of the future, which I don't know what everybody's thoughts is on that, but I believe that eventually we'll just be signing and sealing the model, bypassing the milestones altogether. So we looked at all of the information that we could collect regarding model health and rated it, right? And the items that give you the biggest hits on your health score are in-place families and duplicate instances, mainly because they cause bad data, right? If you've got duplicate instances in your project, then I cannot trust the counts that the schedules are doing. And then began to, so then we put together this Power BI dashboard to kind of show to the leadership of the market sectors. And right, so for example here, so we separated it into model scores below 50 and model scores above 50. So what teams need, perhaps a nudge or some assistance to do better, right? And work with that, and whom to reward, rather. And we needed to improve our situation, to build this data culture. So through systematically, right? We're not going to boil the ocean. So we'll focus with this particular market sectors, one of mine, the mission critical market sector, on 5 projects at a time, right? Pick the ones with the lowest model scores, track the scores, bring it up in the project management meetings, schedule time to meet with the teams and kind of put a plan together to bring those scores up above 50, right? And then eventually this will become second nature. So this is just an example of that procedure.
Hey, Roan, can you hold the mic a little bit?
Absolutely. Is this better? Feeling I'm yelling. Right, so here we are. So you just kind of, so the sector leader, right, who runs the meeting, opens up this dashboard, selects those 5 projects, right? The PMs are there because the BIM data that's producing the model score is combined with the CRM data for the project. So the project, all the other project info is in the same dashboard as well, right? So, and then those PMs then go and proceed and schedule meetings and then this dashboard here, same information but looked at a little bit differently for the people that will be working in Revit, right? So they can see exactly what is causing their score to be what it is, right? So duplicate instances and in-place families, and the idea here is that they proceed from left to right in order to make the best use of their time as they are fixing these models. Okay, and then right, so there's also this page there to show, exactly what the scores are and what the lower limits and upper limits that cause your model score to be what it is. But that's just model health, right? But we can do so much more. Another effort that we are supposed to scroll, but it isn't. That's okay. So we can get more out of our models than just model health data, right? So in this case, a desired piece of information is the count of beds, let's say, in pediatric units, right? So that is the measurement for that is a whole number. It can be extracted from Revit via counting families in a room, right? So that's the method of how we will be extracting it from Revit. And there's so much more, right? All of our market sectors have contributed to this spreadsheet, and I'm supposed to scroll everything and show you how impressive it is. And this is an example of a dashboard that tests that feature, right? So here is the CRM database combined with BIM data again, and here's that one project, the room types and all of those things, and you can see how many, let's see where I'm going to go to, exam rooms, for example, and you can see more about our outpatient rooms, or you can see more about those. And there are 103 exam rooms, let's say, right? And all of the different families that are in there, right? And those families would be the beds, perhaps, right, that we'd be interested in. And then that piece of information, the count of beds, would make its way back to CRM and fill in a field there, right? That's part of the whole project story. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Roan. So one of the other areas that we have talked about is this idea of learning from our issues. So we're talking about how do we actively leverage the data that's in Revit in the way that we deliver our projects, how do we clean that, keep it organized so that it's useful. And then we have this idea of learning from our issues on projects, the dreaded RFI. And so we've been working with a third-party software developer. They've built this platform that allows us to upload RFIs. So to date, we've been testing it. I think there's 7 projects of RFIs, somewhere around 2,000 RFIs total. It automatically analyzes the RFI in terms of what's on there. So it categorizes it for us based off of the AI platform. Or the engine, the agents that are behind it. These are the categories that HED tracks our RFIs in from a tracking perspective and try to understand where we're falling short, etc. What's our problem versus somebody else's problem. And so we're able to take all those PDFs, the agent reads the PDFs, organizes them for us, classifies them for us, and then we can start to understand what are the trends in our errors. What are the trends in the RFIs that are happening with our projects? And then we can start to look at where this idea came out of the strategic plan that Roan mentioned around leveraging and learning from our mistakes during the CA process. So we were using the RFIs as a starting point of, something that we can collect, something that we can organize and learn from. And then, we can start to develop heat maps of like, all right, did this project have issues at the architecture side? Is this more of a mechanical engineering side? Is this a contractor issue? Is this something that we made a mistake on? And so this is starting to help us understand, and the goal here is to turn this platform. We're going to build a single presentation that's going to be like a tech talk of sorts of like the top 10 issues out of RFIs from these projects. The goal is to have about 15 to 20 projects of data in there. But the larger goal is to then turn once we've kind of dialed in this agent, it's going to turn it loose on our RFI folders across the entire firm and monitor them in real time. So let's say you're working on a K-12 project, you can say, what are the last 5 K-12 projects or the biggest RFIs that we've had recently, right? And so part of your project kickoff, you're now looking backwards and you're able to start to learn from those past mistakes. So that's where we're going kind of next in terms of other ways that we're using the data. Both of these examples were actually started as part of the strategic plan before we started our data AI initiatives. And they kind of just like fed into it and just happened to align. So with that, thank you, everybody.
Does anyone have any questions?
So you guys mentioned your CRM a few times, and you're feeding data back into your CRM. At that point, it's still a CRM, because it's a customer relationship management system.
Sure.
So it sounds like you guys are using it as a much broader platform. Is that the way I understand that?
For the last few years, we've called it the CRM as just like the label we call it, but it's since transitioned into a new, our CRM was a custom built internal tool that's since transitioned into our project management tool and broader project data tool.
And then is that where you're storing all your RFI data that you're moving from this application, or is that something else?
Currently, the RFI piece is a separate thing altogether. The idea is that we will start to ingest that into our data lake, not into the project database specifically, but rather get all the data in one place, and then we can build dashboards regardless of the source.
Good question there.
Yeah, thanks for this. As a large firm, the amount of data I think is pretty critical to the quality of the processes you guys are talking about. For a smaller firm, what tools can we maybe leverage a little bit more that isn't going to have this large database of good data?
I mean, for example, that RFI example was 7 projects, and we were already getting useful data, right? So I don't think that there's like some sort of critical threshold. I think there might be a critical threshold in terms of being able to rely on more blindly. You don't ever want to rely blindly, right? But I think maybe with less data, especially at a smaller level, you might want to just be more critical of it, and maybe do some back checks to get a trust built up before you really rely on it.
Tesla has a question?
My question is on adoption, which is the most challenging in my experience. You get all the data, you collect it, you have connected it to your CRM. How has been the reaction of those project managers supporting the execution of what needs to happen from the data collected?
Sure. Actually, I happen to have one in the crowd that might be able to answer that. How do you think about the adoption side, Rebecca? Like, are people excited about it, interested in it?
I think so, but I think it's also part of our culture. I think we're very technology forward. I think there's a culture of experimentation and curiosity that's been cultivated sort of at the highest level. I think it takes a culture of transparency, whereas like initiatives are coming out in the firm, they're being communicated on a pretty consistent basis. When I started at AGD a few years ago, I was shocked how much, because I think about these meetings where you have like your whole company or all the projects, like these are really expensive meetings with everybody on these, and I was shocked. But I started seeing, okay, it pays off because people, if they see it coming and they're introduced to it, when it's an idea, I think they're more likely to adopt it because they feel like they're not caught off guard. Yeah.
I heard culture eats strategy in my past, and some companies implement something like that. I've been very close to Nicole, and I've seen what guys do. It's very interesting that when your partners are very heavily technology interested. So I'm curious on that, because I feel the biggest resistance that I've experienced is you have a great tool, a great workflow. Forever, the R&D and everything, it's there, and nobody's using it.
So on that front, I was just gonna ask Roan, how's the uptake been in terms of like once we started to track the model health, how's the response been from users?
It's been very positive, right? Because it began as a partnership with the PMs and with the other, BIM practitioners, architects, and engineers. It began as a partnership with this mission in mind. We're all in it together, and for that reason, it's been quite successful.
We have a question right here.
That was a very informative presentation. For all the data that you're collecting, how is that accessed by individual users? And I know you have a lot of data connections to the ERP system, ADP, financial information, performance information, documentation information, how long it takes. Are there some access privileges that certain users can access some information? Is it kind of tiered and filtered to some people? If you are a day-to-day user trying to find out how long should it take me to finish this task, can I go through some other projects and kind of find that? How much should this cost? What is the value proposition? Can you give us a little bit of insight on how people are using, accessing, and how you're controlling the privileges access to who can access what information? Is that something you can talk to?
So at our firm, we have a new data governance board. The majority of users have zero access to the data lake or data set, right? We're feeding them the information through like the dashboard, the Roan show, or the R that I was talking about. And so part of it is building interfaces for them. And that's actually, we're actively recruiting some new hires that are, well outside of our realm of industry that are specifically going to be user interface type of people, right? Like how are people going to interact with this data? What you're talking about in terms of if they have an idea, like they want to look up something, that's what we're calling use cases, right? So at the moment, our use case portfolio is close to the 47 or so use cases that we've already identified, with the idea that by the end of this year, we're going to have a process of like, hey, I have this idea. I'm just a normal project architect. I want to submit this idea. It'll go through the vetting process of, is this something that's usable to everybody? And is it something we should make it available to everybody?
I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, great presentation. It's nice to see such a range, large data set. The question I have is, are you already doing or are you exploring connecting these to owners' databases and the outside links? In other words, having a communication between agents, for example. The owner has an agent say, we want to design a hospital, what can you guys do for us? Is that in the cards or not?
We see this process as a way that we can provide an increased value in terms of how we deliver projects, not necessarily, handing over the reins to a client. So, part of this is our transition to get away from designing and offering our services from a straight flat fee or hourly base, but rather by a value proposition to the client and the partners we're working with. I could see a future where maybe from an operations perspective, we have some sort of transition of some data comes from our side to their side for a specific project, but I don't see it happening beyond that, really. All right.
I think that's it. Melvin?